Hey, everybody, and welcome to Life is a Gamble. I know you've missed me. It's been a while since our last episode, but I am back. And Life is a Gamble is the podcast where we talk about life's gambles. But today we are talking to someone who is literally in the gambling business. My guest today is Nigel Eccles, who was one of the founders of FanDuel. So let's get right into it. Nigel Eccles, welcome to Life is a Gamble.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so I'm very interested in how you, first of all, most people know you from FanDuel, but that was not your original startup or your original company. And I'm wondering what your background was and what led to that first company.
Yeah, well, I've been in online gaming since 2000. So the very first company I joined was a company called Flutter.com. And now it merged with Bettor in 2001, and today is Flutter Entertainment, which is the parent company of FanDuel. I relaunched a betting exchange called BetHog in 2003, and it's still operational today. It's a betting exchange based out of Dublin. And then FanDuel actually started in 2007 as a prediction market, which, funnily enough, for 10 years, I had to explain to people what that was. And obviously, Polymarket did so well in last year that I don't have to do that anymore. So HubDub originally was a prediction market. It did very well in 2008. It did less well immediately after the election because people aren't as interested anymore. And that's when we pivoted in 2009 to becoming FanDuel.
What was your educational background before going to work for Flutter?
Oh, yeah, educational. So I studied pure mathematics and military operation research. So my first degree was in pure mathematics. My second degree was in operational research.
And were you drawn to games and gambling before you got into?
Yeah, I've been I've always liked gambling. I've always found it fascinating. Given my maths background, I've always found the sort of maths behind it really interesting. And so probability was something that I've always been fascinated by. And so whenever I started working, I was just drawn to that sector. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I always sort of think it's fascinating that, in the gaming industry, you create your own product. You're actually when I really thought about recently is you're the opposite of an insurance company. And insurance is, they are as a gambling company, you sell variance, right? So people for people whose life is just too boring and too, not enough stuff happens. They have a lot of consistency. They want to buy variance. They're buyers of variance. And as a gambling company, you're a seller of variance. Obviously, insurance is the other way around, which is people that, when life is too risky, and I guess there's certain things you don't want to insure your car getting smashed or your life. You want to sell variance, right? But I think it's really interesting in the gaming companies, you create and sell variance, and then all the different types of companies are different forms of variance that we sell. And so that just drew me into the business in 2000 when I started. And, I've always come back, even though I've left the industry twice, I've always come back to it because I just love that aspect of the business.
Did you gamble yourself? Did you or do you gamble yourself?
Yeah, no, I've gambled since I was a teenager. I remember the first horse I ever won, which is, I think it was, I know the horse was West Tip, which was a grey, that won the Grand National. I think it was in 87. So I was like 12 or 13. And I had a pound on it and I won, 16 pounds. It was 16 to 1. And I was at the moment, I was like, wow, this is amazing. But I always sort of I've always sort of been fascinated. I was always fascinated. And I had friends at university who would go to casinos and they would have systems. And I was like, yeah, that doesn't work. But I was always fascinated by the systems. And, yes, I've always been interested. And I've always been interested in, from a sort of puzzle perspective, like how can you beat it? Like what are the things you can beat? Um, and so, horse racing is really interesting and sports betting because it is beatable. Blackjack, you can card count, but even casino games, are interested in the systems there. Like even if the game is unbeatable, how does a martingale change your payout phenomena? Like I play blackjack a lot. I go to the casino, I play blackjack. I know that it's EV negative for me, but I have ways that I play it that I like to that it'll means that I know in the long run I'm going to lose, but I still play it.
Well, if you at least learn basic strategy,
Mhm.
you're giving up less than 1%.
Right, you're
So
like, yeah, for me it's a pretty good, your cost of entertainment is pretty low.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a little bit worse. You live where do you live?
I live
You're in the U I'm sorry, where?
in New York.
Oh, you're in New York.
Yeah.
Oh, for some reason I thought you were
No,
in
no, no.
UK or Ireland.
I'm British. I'm originally from Northern Ireland, but I moved to New York about 9 years ago.
My kids, as they were growing up, I would preach to them constantly, them and their friends, math is where the money is.
Yeah,
and and as long as you really as long as you understand the concepts of EV
yeah,
and some basic probability, you will find ways to make money.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so what was your job when you first went to work for Flutter?
Oh, I was a product manager for Flutter.
And so what was the impetus then? So you first went into the prediction market. So what was the impetus for that?
Yeah, well, so Flutter was interesting. When I joined Flutter, the idea behind Flutter was more of like an eBay of betting. People could create all these different types of bets, and to trade them with other people. Betfair was their main competitor. Betfair is a betting exchange. You could kind of think of it as like what Robinhood is doing, sports betting contracts at the moment. And that was a real innovation. And what we figured out was that the Betfair model was dramatically better than the Flutter model. And so through the period of 2001, we pivoted Flutter to becoming an exchange. And that's why they ended up merging, because they were essentially the same product. In 2008, when we had launched HubDub, which was our prediction market, just very similar to Polymarket, we sort of felt that a lot of these news stories, we felt that prediction markets were kind of truth-seeking machines, that they would be not only the people who wanted to bet it, but it'd be really interesting to the people that just wanted the information, like who is the favorite, like, who's going to win, like kind of give that information. And we find that, like, oftentimes the news media will report something as significant and you'll go and check the betting market and nothing changed. And that tells you that because the news media, their job is to create news and pretend that something is significant. Dramatically, what we discovered was that, that isn't news. Like, nothing did happen. And so so we created the prediction market because that's what we wanted to tackle. And what we discovered was that prediction markets are brilliant for elections. Like, they're just, like particularly US elections, there's just so many people who are fascinated by it. And so many people have an opinion. A lot of those people have money that they're willing to put behind those opinions. And so it worked really well right up until the election. And then immediately afterwards, that sort of dried up. And what we discovered was that outside of the election, the biggest category by far was sports. And so that's why whenever we sort of were finished with HubDub, we basically said, well, what will we do next? And we said, we should focus on sports. We know how to build really good prediction games. And that's how we pivoted and built FanDuel.
So you were working for Flutter still when you...
Oh, no. I left. No, that was long later. So Flutter was sort of 2000 to 2002. HubDub wasn't. We didn't start it until 2007. And then we ran it 2008 and we launched FanDuel in 2009.
Okay, so at that point you were on your own. It was you and your wife, am I correct?
Yeah, my wife, and we had three other co-founders.
Yeah, and so you knew you wanted it to be sports, and initially it was just fantasy.
That's
What
right. Yeah.
was that decision?
Yeah. Well, so, it's funny. Like, I was in the UK at the time where you could sports bet. But in the US you couldn't. It was only like one state was Nevada. You could sports bet in the US. And we always thought that was weird, but, there was a law called the Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act,
Mhm.
was passed in 2003 that, like, sort of kicked out a lot of poker operators, but in it was a carve out for fantasy sports. And I remember the actual language. It was like, fantasy sports is a game where it's a statistical accumulation of points, blah, 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 blah. And I remember being on a flight and just reading it and going, okay, well, there's nothing here that says that, a fantasy sports game has to last like the entire season. And, there's nothing here that says, and I'm like, we could build a game that's a lot faster and a lot more fun and exciting than traditional fantasy sports. But we're still within the letter of the law. The letter of the law is written here. We're going to stay within this, and we're going to build that game. And we think that's going to be a lot more fun than what people are currently playing on like Yahoo or ESPN. That was the idea.
Yeah, yeah. Well, certainly your timing could not have been better.
Well, yeah, it's interesting, and I've sort of thought a lot about timing. It's, there's an interesting question. If we hadn't done it, would somebody else have done it? Like, did we create that? And I don't actually know. When we created there was a couple of other games, but it was only whenever we started to be successful that we see an explosion of competition. Like, we launched in 2009. There was one Draft Street launched not that long after. DraftKings was 2012, but really, and then there was 100 other competitors launched in that period. But they were largely sort of drifting about off what we were building, which was they saw, like, whenever we started, a lot of people thought we were crazy. Like, people were like, "Oh, it's not a real big business." Like, like people tried, like, but it was only when we started raising, 10, 15, 20, $70 million. Suddenly people were like, wow, this is a really big business. And then it became, and then where the timing was really good was, if we launched that in 2009, by 2018, so 9 years later, here it was a brand that had huge brand awareness, had millions of users, we had 500 people, and that put us in an incredible position, whenever sports betting became legal, that we then could take that brand and go, boom, we can be number one. And FanDuel has become pretty much number one in every state in the US when it's opened up, so it's basically gone in, and it's just really because they had such a depth of brand and user base that sort of gave them such a huge advantage.
Well, and they were so well positioned to get into regular gambling,
Right.
including internet gambling.
Right. Yeah. So
Um,
here you had fantasy sports, which, in a lot of ways is very, very similar to like regular sports betting. It was the same user base. It was a very similar user behavior. And the brand was, very much connected with the people who would be sports betting. They were seeing it on ESPN. So going from fantasy sports to sports betting was a very small step. Whereas, something like MGM or Caesars, who think, oh, we know gambling, but sports fans didn't really associate them with sports betting. Like, they didn't see them on ESPN. They were like, MGM is a casino in Vegas. It's something to do with, the Wizard of Oz. It's really nice, but it's not an app I would have on my phone. And so that just gave FanDuel and DraftKings just huge advantage whenever that market opened up.
yeah, I'm one of the things that surprises me, and maybe you were gone from FanDuel by the time these discussions happened, but I live in Las Vegas,
Mhm.
and I'm just shocked that FanDuel is not here. And I know they have to have a brick and mortar casino,
Yes.
but it would be nothing for them to buy
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a big one, right? They can.
It's hilarious. Honestly, I feel the Nevada gaming authorities massively screwed this one up. Like I went and saw them. I went to see them in the summer of, I think it was 2016 or 2017. And we were called in front of them. And I remember the panel, and I remember actually being really impressed. Like one of the panel was saying, Apple has got 1 million developers working on their platform. And in Vegas, we have 3 main suppliers, like, IGT, Scientific Games. And they were like, if we don't start to innovate and welcome more people in the industry, we're going to get left behind. And I was like, amazing. This is like, these guys get it. Like they want innovation. And we ended that session and they said, look, we want you guys in Vegas. And so like, this is all you have to do. And it's like, come buy a casino. And it was just like, and here we are, like, today in Vegas, how many suppliers does Vegas have today? Like the same as they had like 10 years ago. Right. And so I think Nevada sort of felt, we're the number one in gaming. You have to be in Nevada if you want to be a serious player. And, we tried in 2016. I know that FanDuel and DraftKings since then has tried to kind of work for Vegas. They'd love to be in Nevada. And Nevada, I just think, I don't know. In those early days, I think it was maybe arrogance. I just don't know why they haven't sort of realized that the world has changed.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And it is arrogance. And they shot themselves in the foot because for sports bettors, Nevada is now the worst state.
Right. Yeah, I can do it on my phone. I can't
Yeah, you can't use a computer.
Yeah.
And to sign up and put money in the account, you have to physically go to a casino. Which is just crazy.
And I understand, like, they feel their job is to protect the physical casino, but there comes a point where you're like, MGM, Caesars, actually, they're tier 2 players, but they've done pretty well. Like, you can't stand in the way of innovation of that. Not when you have customers going, like, this is how I want to play. To kind of create these artificial rules. And that's essentially what they did. And so, I think it was, a huge mistake. I think it's what we've seen is like an explosion of gaming around the US, and Nevada is sort of like and I guess Nevada in a lot of ways has sort of pivoted to become more of an entertainment destination and less of a gambling destination. And that's worked, but they kind of could have had both.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people running the casinos now really are not coming from a gaming background. And it used to be that the gambling drove everything else.
Right. Yeah.
And now it's sort of a, redheaded stepchild or something.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, we always view sports betting in Nevada as being not as a profit center and more as a required service to like service the VIPs, whereas we always felt that sports betting was going to be front and center. Like we weren't just using it as a way to get you to the high the slots tables.
Yeah. When did you end up leaving FanDuel?
Oh yeah, so I left FanDuel end of 2017, start of 2018. Actually, just before PASPA was repealed. I love being startups, and by that stage, even then, this company had got very, very big, and so I left and started to do some really interesting other startup and in music and social media, esports. It's a real kind of mixture of other verticals. I actually tried to just get totally as far away from gaming as possible. I was like, you know what? I don't want my entire career to be gaming. And what I discovered with those other verticals was that I actually really missed gaming. It was the vertical that I know and really love. And so by 2021, so only, I guess, 4 years later, I was like back into gaming. And I was like, okay, I've still got a few things I really want to do in this sector, and I've really enjoyed being back in in the category.
We're going to take a quick break and be right back. Okay, we are back with Nigel Eccles. Do you still have the music and the esports that you started?
No. So there was kind of three different. So there was like social media. There was a music business, and then there was cards. The music and card business we sold. The card business is still operational. Really interesting verticals. Both sort of had a very crazy 2021 whipsaw of like everything went great and then everyone went terrible. And so for both businesses, we saw this incredible 2021 spike, and then things kind of whipsawed in 2022, 23. And so those businesses then we ended up selling on.
I saw you made a comment on Twitter recently. There was a tweet about the increased revenue at FanDuel, and your comment was basically that the bettors have gotten stupider.
Yeah.
Which I agree with you, but could you expand on that a little?
Yeah, no, I thought that would generate a little bit of a response. It was funny, like somebody was like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Actually, I am, and I'll tell you why." So number one, I think bettors go stupider for two reasons. Maybe three reasons. The first one's fairly simple, which was, pre-PASPA, the people who were betting in Vegas were a lot of them were sharps. They were really focused on it. It wasn't as recreational. And so the money was sharper. And even today, I think the money in Vegas is sharper. Today we've got everybody, and they may have very strong opinions, but they're not good bettors necessarily. But then the two other factors are so the second factor is that if you're a profitable bettor on a FanDuel or DraftKings, you've been banned or limited, right? And obviously, a lot of people are very aware of that. And so by definition, the sharps are gone. They're not on FanDuel or DraftKings. That's why FanDuel it's one of the reasons FanDuel has got a 15% margin. And the third reason then is parlays. From a EV perspective, a parlay is a dramatically worse bet. But consumers love them, right? And consumers love lotteries. So I'm not saying that they're idiots. I'm just saying that they're like, if their intention is to like make money, this is not a great way of going about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, as you said at the beginning, they want to buy variance.
They want to buy variance.
And when the company pre-packages a, same game parlay that's going to pay them, 50 to 1,
right?
But it's minus 25% to them.
Yeah.
They don't care. They want to, but I have to disagree with you. The sharps.
I've interviewed consumers, and I remember one guy saying to me, and I was like, "Why do you play a parlay? Like, you realize this thing is going to like a 20 to 30% margin." And he said, "What should I bet?" I was like, like it's straight bets, like evens and stuff. And he said, "So I go in, I put $50 down, and I win $50." He's like, "Why? How is that going to change my weekend? Right? Like, why would anybody remotely excited about that?" And I was like, "Now you put it like that, I kind of get. I do kind of get it. Like it's and that's the way they view it. It's like a lottery ticket, and a straight bet just isn't going to do it for them. They need to see something that's really going to move the dial, and that's why like they don't think in terms of EV. They think, if I win, I win, and if I lose, like it's discretionary capital. So yeah, that's why they love parlays.
Yeah, I have to disagree with you though about the sharps. They definitely are still on FanDuel and DraftKings.
Yes, maybe. Yeah, there definitely are a few that they're maybe not trading under their own names.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a constant cat and mouse game of having accounts get
Yeah. No, there are, but I the books are pretty good at catching that stuff. Like they're pretty good, and that's like it's always going to be cat and mouse, but. I've seen some of the stuff behind the scenes, and I'm like, yeah, like they'd see changes in betting patterns, and it's not like like we operate. BetDex operates in India, and it takes a lot of sharp action, and you see that money, and there's no limits there.
But that's an exchange,
That's
right?
absolutely,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's a totally different business model, but there's a lot of very sharp action there.
sure. Yeah, yeah. And they don't have to hide it.
They don't have to hide it. No,
Yeah.
they don't. It's
Did you ever, there are books, sharp books
mhm,
who will take all the action and
yeah,
not limit people.
yeah.
Did you ever consider going that route, or
So what
were you not that
I wasn't
tied
on
into the?
FanDuel whenever those decisions were being made. But what I will say is, if I was, no, and for a very simple reason is that um if you're going to be the mass market consumer product that FanDuel had the opportunity to be and is today, it is much more profitable not to take sharp action. It's much more profitable to just, limit the sharps and put out lines that, are going to sucker the punters. That's probably
Yeah.
the pejorative, but that they want, right? Like, you're going to push on parlays, but you're not going to take the sharp action because it's going to reduce your profitability.
Mm.
The reason why bookmakers take sharp action in, say, in like India, is that they don't KYC, so they couldn't limit it, right? So the books there have no means of limiting, and therefore they have to accept the sharp action.
Right. But if you look at a book like Pinnacle Sports,
Right.
they just they have the sharpest lines
Right.
because,
Yeah.
well,
And
they make
but
money on volume that.
they're not a mass market, like onshore regulated entity. And that's the
Right.
difference, is that FanDuel had this opportunity to be this, the number one consumer brand that takes money from, everybody, the mass market, shall we say. It's much more profitable to go the route of, let's limit the sharps and take the money from the mass market.
Yeah. So your latest venture
Mhm.
is BetHog,
That's right. Yeah.
and that is, if correct me if I'm wrong, that's a crypto casino.
That is a crypto casino. It operates internationally. We don't operate in the US or the UK for that matter. We take deposits in, about a dozen different cryptocurrencies. The insight behind it was one was that when I'd always looked at the casino market, and I'd always been a little bit surprised that there wasn't as much innovation. Like, I would look at these slot games and I'd go, wow, those are the same games I was playing like 20 years ago. That to me was like, this is an industry that could innovation. I also saw that crypto was the part of the market that was showing the most innovation, right? Provably fair games that came from crypto, streaming, massive growth for slots, and it's coming from streaming. You look at Instagram Reels and TikTok. These are all crypto casinos, and these are influencers playing these games and creating these storylines that are incredibly popular. Like, I know people that follow them who don't play casino and don't even think of playing casino, but they just love the whole storylines, the reactions, the highs and the lows. And so that got me really interested to say, look, this is where the innovation's happening. This is really interesting. The other thing that I thought was fascinating was, when we were at FanDuel, in a lot of ways, we just lived at the mercy of our payment provider. So, and you would be paying, 15, 20% of your, revenue would go to payments. And in fact,
Wow.
for FanDuel, I think it was, even today, I think in Q1, it was like 12.5%. DraftKings, I think, spent $500 million last year on payments. And to
Wow.
me, this is dead money. Like, this is money that goes to Visa and MasterCard and their shareholders that has no benefit to the players, right? So the player, all they see is, I deposit my money and turned up my account. Well, the bookmaker, the sportsbook, didn't see all that money. And when you withdraw and then redeposit, then that's another 4 or 5% gets taken out. And so with crypto just solves that problem. So with crypto, what we do is we give somebody a wallet address, and they basically send their crypto to that wallet address, and boom, we get 100% of that money within seconds. And so for the user, it's like so we immediately save ourselves 15 to 20% of our costs, which then we can give back to our user. Like we do a rake back, daily, weekly, monthly rake back to a user, and adds to about 30%. So most of that is actually the savings we make in terms of payments that we can just give directly back to the consumer and say, hey, you know what? Here's a bunch of money that we don't actually have to pay to Visa and MasterCard. So that's really cool. And then from the consumer experience is like, this is instant, they basically send the money, it's there, and they can play it immediately and withdraw it. We have instant withdrawal, right? Like if you're an established customer of us, when you go to withdraw, it's like, boom, straight back into your wallet.
Wow. Yeah. Not here in the U.S., unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, not in the U.S. And there isn't
is it slots only, or do you have table games as well?
Slots, live, we've live dealer and sportsbook.
Is the live dealer Evolution Gaming?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Evolution and Pragmatic do live dealer, and it very popular. We've one of the game formats, which is the Salon Privé. We had a user come in and use it, the first user this week, and it's minimum. You need a minimum $6,000 in your account, and it's minimum $1,000 per hand. So it's your high stakes player, and it's fun. And you have a live dealer, just you, one-on-one, and so like it's a really good product.
Huh. Yeah, I notice you are following crypto and talk about it on Twitter a lot. And how do you manage your risk in terms of the fluctuation of the crypto?
Yeah, well, that's actually not so bad because we hold people's currency in crypto. So if somebody deposits in Bitcoin, we hold it in Bitcoin. And so what that means is if they deposit a Bitcoin, which is I think currently about 100,000, and if Bitcoin were to drop by 20%, they would come back the next day and they would still have a Bitcoin. It would just be worth 80,000. And so which is what they want, because if you are into crypto, you want to hold it in crypto. You don't want to hold it in fiat. And so, but it also means for us is we don't have to manage that liability.
So does that mean whatever coin you deposit with, you must withdraw in the same coin?
That's correct. You deposit in Bitcoin, you withdraw in Bitcoin. You deposit in Solana, you withdraw in Solana.
Yeah.
So that volatility is actually, funnily enough, most of our deposits actually are in stable coins. So USDT is very, very popular. And I think it's, there's obviously people hold crypto because as an investment, but I guess for casino, it's discretionary money. And so that's why it's like USDT, that's their spending money. Whereas, they're probably holding Bitcoin and they don't want to play with that.
So where do you see it all going? Where do you see this 5 years from now?
Yeah. So I think we're going to see internationally. I said something before is I don't think we will have crypto casinos in 5 years' time because I think all casinos will be crypto casinos. Apart from regulated ones. Like it would make huge sense for New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Michigan to enable crypto payments. There's $3 trillion in crypto assets and they're highly liquid and they're held by people who are risk seeking. They're absolutely, perfect for a sportsbook or casino. I would hope that, the regulators there would sort of say, wow, we should be in on this market. I definitely think we get there in 10 years. I don't know if we get there in 5 years. Certainly under the Trump administration, way more favorable towards crypto, which has been, a huge boon for us because before, it was like they treated crypto like it was all there to fund terrorism. When really people just wanted, to own their own assets and be able to use them without interference. Like that really, I think that should be protected in the Constitution. And I think it probably is. But so I do think that crypto is going to become, and like the other thing from for the onshore ones is like, why are they paying 20% of their revenue? Not, this is not, it's not 20% of deposits, 20% of your revenue to MasterCard and Visa, who offer a really crappy product, right? Like, and I remember like with Visa, like, we'd have a user who would deposit and the next day decide that, you know what, I didn't really want to lose that money. And they would do a chargeback. And then it would be on us to prove that that person actually had really made that deposit. And I'm like, that's crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, I think over the next 5 years internationally, we will see all sportsbook and casinos move really heavily to crypto. And then over 10 years, I think we'll see the onshore ones go as well. I think we're going to see more of the innovation that we see in the crypto space come onshore. So, we're going to see more crash games, provably fair, something the crypto games invented, which is, how do I know this game was fair? And it's something that we have, but really Stake invented it, which is they give you a seed phrase that you can, after the fact, prove that game was fair, that, they weren't changing stuff behind the scenes. And again, it's just a great innovation that, like, I think we're going to see then happen, across the industry and come on shore.
Wow. Yeah. Fascinating. Anyway, I really want to thank you for taking the time with me today.
No problem.
Yeah. And any final thoughts?
No, it's great to be on the show. Yeah, like we're excited about what we're building. Like we also just felt with BetHog is that we could bring a lot more sort of original products and original games, which is essentially what we've done. So it's we're really, really exciting to the next few years.
Actually, now that you mention that, have you tried innovating in the table game space?
We haven't, but I'd love to. It's really interesting in table games, and we see it like we have really big influencers like on Instagram and on Twitter and on TikTok that are talking about games. And then you have a live dealer experience, and these are just like typical live dealers. What if we really could combine those two? I'd love to be able to like take some of our top influencers and have them dealing the game.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I just think there's so much opportunity there. And then make it much more of a party experience. Like the best experience I've ever had in Vegas is, you're at a blackjack table and it's a fun party experience. Well, we could do that. You just don't really get that online because normally the dealers are not, I don't know, there may be a lot of them are not hired for their personality, shall we say. But what if we made, like, if you look at Peloton, look at the people who do the Peloton coaches, they're like celebrities.
Yeah.
Like, why aren't these dealers like more named? Like, I want this guy. He's hilarious. Like, let's have this, and part of the reason that their personality doesn't come through is I don't think they're rewarded for it. What if we could,
I think it's discouraged.
Just discouraged. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so when I first got out of college, I was a blackjack dealer here in Las Vegas. And most of the casinos, their attitude was dummy up and deal the cards.
Right.
and I worked at a place where they literally hired the dealers for their personalities,
right,
and told us, you're here to host the players. This is a service industry.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the dealers would have a great time with the players.
Yeah. And that's what it's all about. Like I honestly think one of the online gaming, while it's been a phenomenal growth industry, for me, in a way, is still failing to deliver the one thing that offline gaming delivers, which is just that that social and community experience with strangers, right? Like, blackjack table, one of the few places in America where you can talk to a complete stranger without them thinking you're crazy, right? Like that's like that to me, online doesn't do that. And I think that's something that we still need to like really figure out, because I just think that's really powerful.
Yep, I agree. Anyway, thank you again.
No, thank you.